This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Mod Pod. Today we are going to talk about whether or not companies are changing the way they consider the technology needs of their frontline workers, whether or not the role of the digital officer is a thing, and Loop. And today, to go through it, we have Sharon Harvey, who is a Global Account Director, Chris Burns, who is a Technical Architect. Say hello, folks.
Hello.
Hey, they're there. Brilliant. And so let's get chatting, I guess. Cool. Right, on to topic number one.
Okay, so the topic that I wanted to bring today was, have companies changed the way that they consider their frontline workers? Are they now considering new technologies for their workforce? Historically, we've seen companies have that technology divide between their desk-based workers and frontline workers. They typically have access to an IT system, emails, phones, etc., and collaboration tools, whereas have we forgotten the technology needs of the frontline worker? Chris, Peter, what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a quick answer, right? But I think yes is the answer, but it's getting better, right? I think technology is getting better at recognizing it. Certainly from my point of view, I have family that have frontline workers that work for them, and you're right to point out, right? Traditionally, IT has always had a PC or something. That's how you've interacted. You needed a desk on your phone, or a PC on your desk,
Yeah.
right? Now, today, frontline workers just haven't got that, but mobility is definitely changing the way. I think most frontline workers at least have a mobile phone. So even those that haven't got dedicated devices, or those big organizations with the money to throw at frontline workers, can still use them. And I'm taking it from a Teams spec here, right? Teams has now got very mobile focused, and the tools within Teams allow a lot more interaction with frontline workers, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're absolutely right, and I'd probably even take it a step further, in the sense that the technology now is at a point where, between mobile phones and tablets, whether they bring your own device or company provided, I guess is kind of irrelevant. The access to the technology for the frontline work should not be an excuse for a company not to be doing something with their frontline workers. And one of the reasons is, you said that almost everybody has their own mobile phone, and we know that there are, sort of organizations that don't allow their frontline workers to have their mobile phones with them during the workday, but the vast majority do. And we have seen it in companies where the frontline workers have started to build their own shadow IT through the likes of WhatsApp to get quicker answers, because their actual sort of corporate provided solution isn't good enough. Yeah. So, I think from a relatively sort of black and white viewpoint, the technology should be encouraged out into the front line, even if that means that you provide somebody with a relatively sort of basic smartphone. I mean, let's face it, we can control them, right? We can say, actually, I'm not going to allow you to make external calls, or I'm not going to allow you to do this, or whatever it is. So you can lock it down to just app usage.
Yeah.
So what is stopping somebody saying, well, actually, stock check stuff? Yeah, I'm not going to make you walk halfway across the store to go to to a PC or a terminal or whatever it is to find out what's going on with the stock. I'm going to actually just let you flip it open onto your mobile phone, being, yeah, we've got one of those. I'll go and get it for you.
Yeah.
But I think simple example, right? Shoe shop. How has that not changed in this day and age? With people go, yeah, I'll go and see if we've got a size 5. Not for me, obviously. I'm not a size 5. That would be awkward. But Actually, there's a whole beery story to be told about a friend of ours who was very tall with very, very small feet, kept falling over. But yeah, you just think, well, why can't shoe shop staff, can't say that, shoe shop staff, just flick open and go, yeah, we've got one out the back.
Yeah,
isn't that easier?
actually, that's a good point as well. I mean, my daughter, she's 18. All of last year and for the first half of this year, she was studying for her A levels, and while she's been studying, she's had a part-time job in a well-known supermarket. And so, all through sort of last year, she was a frontline worker. But it was very difficult for her to receive sort of updated information, and they did exactly what you said, Pete. They created their own famous consumer app, if you like,
Right.
to communicate. And it really was quite chaotic, and because of the nature of the short notice of shift that became available because people were off due to COVID, or they were having to isolate, the information was that she was receiving was either very clunky or she wasn't receiving it at all, and all the safety briefs, etc. So so it was very difficult. I think also there's a mixture of the frontline workers. Some are tech savvy. The younger ones are tech savvy. So if they had access to different technologies, for Teams, for example, if they had access to that, the likelihood is they'd adapt very quickly to that because they're already pretty tech savvy. But then again, it's how do you train those frontline workers who are not tech savvy? They've not typically been exposed to working on laptops or using collaboration tools as well. So there's that aspect as well.
Yeah, and that actually, that very point came up in an engagement that we've been dealing with recently, in the sense of what do we put in, and it's a large retail organization, but what do we put within those stores to help modernize the way it all operates? And interestingly enough, I think the conclusion was, for day one, we're going to have to put straightforward phones in there to keep the continuity. We know technically the more advanced, communications through, the likes of Teams, etc., is absolutely the right long-term goal. And yes, you've got, oh God, it's so sort of stereotyping with the age groups, isn't it? But you do have, the younger generation who are comfortable with video, comfortable with the apps, comfortable with the way things, how you find them, what they do if they don't work, that kind of thing. And that's absolutely fine. But you've then got casual staff, you've got the Saturday staff, you've got the ones who are, as you said, sort of slightly older generation, maybe don't get it, haven't been exposed to it. You've got a whole bunch of people, and then you think, well, how do we train 150,000 people who might have a churn rate of 20% a year, and so actually in that case, you just think there's so much we could do with this, and we're working through a pilot store to see how we can make it work. But there is a really big thing about, what sort of people you're dealing with. And I think, is the technology the challenge? No, I don't think it is. I think it's the management just wanting continuity or being afraid to go back to the business and going, actually, do you know what? The system we've got here at the moment is just nowhere near good enough today.
Yeah. I think there's two challenges there, right? Because I think you're right. The technology, the technology's there, but it's the training of the technology. The other thing I'm thinking on there is, right, I'm thinking from my family and actually a customer as well, is you mentioned to it that briefly, that is the churn rate, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we see many customers with a really good way of onboarding quickly new staff. And I think the churn rate at Frontline is a lot quicker, right? So at this process of, right, you need to license, you need to do it. There's no elegant way of doing it. And what you'll find, certainly,
Viva.
Yeah, well, I agree. The tools
Yeah,
are there, yeah, but right, it's making sure that the processes are in place, because we
Yeah.
hit this problem all the time, right? Security say, oh, it needs to be vetted. By the time you've gone through all of those processes, that member of staff could be just a seasonal member of staff at Amazon. I shouldn't probably throw a name there, but you get the point, right? That they could only be there 3 months, right? What's the cost of onboarding and offboarding them? And until you can nail that down, frontline staff will always be, right, well, actually, I'm using a generic account, which brings its own problems. But I will say this, that I think it is ripe for bringing new stuff, right? Ripe for innovation. We talk about that stock warehouse for those shoes, right? We know with Power Apps, right? We're not only just searching, saying, oh well, we've got a pair of size 5s. Actually, the member of staff who's taking in stock at the back door, he's going, actually, do you know what? With my little iPhone 6S that I've had for 10 years, do you know what? It's got a camera on there. I can load up the Power Apps. I'm just going to scan the barcode. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. So those devices, I genuinely believe we're missing a trick when it comes to frontline. I think there's a lot of a lot of innovation to be done with frontline staff. We just have to take our mind out from saying tech is a PC on a desk. I think mobility we're still only scratching the surface. I think we've gone a long way in the last 5 years on mobility, but I think there's a lot more left to go.
Yeah, and I think on the shoe shop trail still, me as a consumer, we had to go in and buy a pair of football boot or rugby boots or whatever it was for the boy the other day, and I would have been quite happy taking that that boot off the shelf, going to an iPad or whatever it is, tablet of some sort, stuffed on the side of the shoe rack, and go, yeah, it's that one, size 5.5. Have you got it? No. Okay, I'll put it back on the shelf. I don't necessarily want to have to bother somebody for them to go and check in the in the stock out the back to come out. Yeah. So I do think the whole of that sort of frontline organizational piece needs to just be sort of like thrown up in the air. And you've got to be able to cater for this, back to the older generation, the likes of my mum going into a shoe shop and using a tablet to work out the sizes. There's long gone. So you do have to still cater for the personal side, but maybe not the routine stuff.
As well as you've got, with the frontline workers, you've got that churn, right? But for example, my daughter, she's been working for the supermarket for almost 2 years. She's gone to university. She's transferred her job, very luckily, into the local city where she's at university. So the supermarket have allowed that. So if she's learnt how to use, let's say, Teams from her mobile app, then she's still with the company. She's, the investment, it has become worthwhile. She may do another 3 years while she's at university with that supermarket. Altogether, there's 5 years. And then for those that are less technical savvy, there is that element where there's going to be more training required or help required to get those employees up and running. But does that then mean that they may work for the company longer because they feel less frustrated in their role? They feel like they're learning something new. Would they then be able to transfer possibly to a desktop role because they feel they've learned those skills? A bit, learning technology, they feel like they're upskilling. Would that then keep them within the company? So there's that side of it as well. And for this slightly older generation, people are finding themselves sometimes later on in life redundant, and to be feeling like you're still learning something new, that you're moving on with technology. It may be that technology has always been a problem for them, and to actually, it's on a mobile app, but that still might be a big step for them, maybe.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the business process piece. So we want to simplify business process, and that's partly what the next topic's about.
Yeah.
But you've got one part which is if you simplify the business process, theoretically it gives the people more time to either do the value add stuff or to spend more time with your clients in store, providing that sort of real customer service level. I think the fine line to tread, though, is not turning the human component into the robot at the subservience of the app. That's the thing. And it's, you do see it in several places, where the machines are going, here's an alert, this machine needs that done to it, and actually what you get is a result of the human being trotting around to that machine doing what they're told.
Yeah.
I think you have to make sure that you don't turn the humans into the robots. I mean, robot is just the was it the Ukrainian or something word for labor?
Yeah,
something like that. So it's, I think you've got to make sure it's that right way around.
Yeah.
It's the acceptance of technology, isn't it? Right. I think when you start talking to people about you're going to do this for these stuff, the first thing that they're going to go into, what's in it for me, right? You've got to make their life easier. If you can make somebody's life easier, people are so much more accepting of technology. But you're right. If it's difficult, people are going to say, why am I going to doing this on this device when I've got a bit of paper that I've done for the last 25 years, and all I've got to do is just put that in this big suction machine and it goes and sends it up to the main office, right? You want to change something and you want to make things better, you've got to make sure that you, as you point out there, Pete, it has to have the human element. They've got to say, this is in it for me and it makes my life easier. And it's so much easier to introduce technology.
That's it. You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
What's in it for me?
Yeah.
Cool. Brilliant place to end. But we can go on to the next topic now, which is all about digital officers. So brilliant. Right, on to topic 2. So my topic is, I guess, quite closely related to what we've just been talking about. But for me, there is a question about whether organizations now, and it's probably something you have to reach at a certain organization size. I don't know what that is. But should organizations have somebody who is a kind of a digital officer, or whatever title it is we want to put against it, whatever label, but basically somebody whose job it is to go around the business looking for business problems to be solved by technology? Because I don't think people do it at the moment.
I think you're probably right, actually.
Cool. We'll wrap it up there then. Yeah. That's 2 we've nailed off in about 30 seconds of slides.
Yeah, I don't think businesses actively have it, right? Because what you're going to call them, chief digital officer, CDO. I'm sure there's a financial product that's under that same title, right? It's interesting, this one, right? Because you and I spoke about Kaizen in a previous conversation, and I think some of that is not necessarily having a defined role, but having the whole.
Just for those who don't know what Kaizen is.
So Kaizen is a continuous improvement, but done at every level. So as a member of staff, if you see something that can actually be improved, what we tend to find is as people will go, I wish we could do that better. And they don't do anything with it, right? And unless it's bubbled up and said, actually, instead of just saying we wish, because that will save the company 10 minutes worth of work, right? If that extrapolates over the year, it could be 100 minutes or a 2 years worth of work. It's something that should be. So Kaizen is really this process of finding those improvements, but also having the structure within the company and the ability to raise that up and it to be implemented. So I think the point that I'm making on with that is that Kaizen it's a Japanese word, right? It was this idea that's come over from there. It shouldn't be a one person, because I think the challenge with one person is that they only have one perspective. And if they sit at the C level, it might be the same as a CIO, right? And I'm not saying that all CIOs don't have a good vision of what goes on in their business, but you have a certain perspective. It tends to be a higher level looking down rather than down in the weeds looking up.
Well, you're absolutely right on that front, and there is a great image which I'll share with you guys, but it's referred to as the iceberg of ignorance. And basically you picture the shape of an iceberg. The higher you are with the senior management right at the tip of the iceberg, the further away from the actual problems you are. So you can do strategy, yes, you can do direction, you can do all that, but it's the people on the ground floor who are experiencing probably the pain. And so that piece that you said about having multiple people, I think you're absolutely right. So maybe the concept of the digital officer is wrong. Digital officers, yes. And for me, I think that should probably be you got your ground force, you're probably up at your supervisor level, to go, actually, do you know what, this is a real pain in the backside. Every week we have to do blip.
Mm-hmm. We have a customer that's coming up that have given us a challenge, right? Their senior management have said, we want to get these reports quicker from, I'm going to say it's a big structure in the North Sea, so take from that what you will, right? So they want to be able to get reports, and they've got challenges from there, and they've asked us as a company to go in and have a look, right? One of the things that I've said to them is that we can't just take this senior level view. What we should be doing is speaking to the people who are rolling up all of this information and trying to send a 1.5 terabyte email and finding out what their challenges are. And I think it's always been something that
1.5 terabyte email.
Honestly, this is how bad it's getting. And they're saying, well, I just want my reports, right? So they've challenged us to say, is there a better way? And it's actually a really innovative company, considering they're from an industry which probably is in 2030 might not be here, right? So I think the challenge here is to make sure that, as you say, Pete, right, you need to be the people in the weeds, because they're going to tell you, despite what came up 6 months ago as the strategy, the people in the weeds are going to say, yeah, that's what they think happens, but this is actually what is happening. Now, I'm not saying that we disregard people at the top, because you still need that. And I think where the CDO would come in really helpful there, Pete, is making it happen. So not necessarily finding the problems, but speaking to those people and saying, right, okay, you tell me where the problems are. What's the blocker from making that improvement? So the people still make those suggestions and still bubble them up, but they will always hit blockers. And it might be the Luddites within the business that say, do you know what? I've always done it this way. And that always tends to be, right? It might be your supervisor who says, no, we're not doing that because we've always done it this way, because he doesn't want to change his way of working. And I think where the CDO could do is unlock those internal politics that could potentially prevent some of these improvements being made. And I try to see that role, that CDO, is not necessarily being the person to make those improvements, but actually to help unlock what he finds within the business.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about you, Sharon? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a company that I'm working with at the moment, and which actually was why I brought up the frontline worker subject in the first place. But so if we go back to that slightly and look at, the team that were in charge of rolling out, or they accelerated their migration to Teams last year, and that was accelerated because of COVID. They looked after all their desktop workers, and then they realised that their business had grown by 20%, and their factory workers were, in the forefront of their minds at that point. And it was down to the communications coming from the managers within that factory site that they needed help with better communicating to their frontline workers. And there wasn't a role of a digital officer. That role didn't exist. It was down to the project managers who were dealing with all the different aspects and projects around that Teams rollout, but there was nothing specific for those, or anyone specific for those factory workers to come to. And they're globally set out. They've now done 50% of their factory workforce, but they are continually looking at ways to improve. And I think, again, if you look at teamwork analytics and you look at the reporting that you can take from that to also identify what is the adoption, what is the user experience, how are they using Teams, and the digital officer can take that information and work with those frontline workers, or work better with the employees to make sure that they are getting the best out of that experience.
That's a really interesting comment, considering what we're currently discussing here at Modality. So Teamwork's analytics and the information that comes out of it, it's one thing that in the consultancy team that we've been speaking about, right? It tells you what's wrong, but doesn't necessarily tell you how to fix it. And I know we're changing that, Pete, that we're introducing a team that takes that information out of TWA and says, well, okay, yeah, you might have 76% packet loss, 200 milliseconds that's causing this, but what does that mean in the real world, and how can you take that information and improve upon it? So yeah, it's very, very
I think that role would be, or the team. I think, yes, ultimately, Pete, I think, yes, you're right. There should be a team. I think, given that so much has changed over the last few years, and this particular customer that I'm working with, they've said it themselves, is we just lost sight of this piece. We want to make sure everyone's having a great experience. Everybody has what they need, has the tools to be able to do their job and to do it to the best they can. There's often sort of people will come away from work, they'll grumble at home, well, I wasn't able to do this, it was so frustrating, or with their colleagues or with their friends, work was really frustrating today. Like you said, I was trying to upload a 1.5 terabyte email, or send a document, or pick up some communication. I mean, there is a role there, I think, for that now, even more than ever so before.
And I think, just listening to you two talk there, it strikes me that we probably, again, get the old big tarry brush out, we probably only address the needs of the users at the point that we're doing the project.
Yeah.
Then we put the project in and we probably walk away. Whereas for me, I see this as much more, this is an operational thing. This isn't a, yes, we're going to put in a different form of comms platform or collaboration platform, etc. Yes, that's fine and crack on. But this needs to be a right. Who's got what problems? Get the problems out of the teams. Let's prioritize them, and then say, do you know what? Okay, we can tackle that one because we've got Power Platform. We could automate that bit for them, and da 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 da. So I think there's a real ongoing change in mentality.
And I think I agree, and I think it will also just keep evolving anyway, because technology is consistently evolving. That having that role in place is going to evolve as well, isn't it?
That's it. Technology is evolving, but come back to the previous conversation. The frontline workers, the ground floor workers, they're probably not going to know that you can now insert live content into a Teams chat because they've not been party to the conversations with their techs, and they're all, they're technical architects, or whether or not they're going to do it from a CISO perspective or that sort of stuff. So you've got to make sure that whatever your group of people who work in this digital officer type position, have an understanding of the kind of things that could be done.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't have to show them how it can be done. You just have to sow the seed that, could we do that? Yeah, we could.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting challenge, because I think too much we focus on the how, and taking it back to our previous conversation, what's in it for me, right? Showing that, well, actually, if you use this is what can be done, and this is the outcome that can be done, right? So I think, we talk about, our next subject coming up, right? Putting live content into a Teams chat. Well, yeah, it sounds interesting, but actually, what does it mean for me? What do I get out of it? Wow, actually, this makes my job or my life easier. I think
there's that as well, and I think there'll be a lot of employees that feel more empowered with it, because they've not had these technologies, they've not had access to it before, so it's new to them, and everywhere, is going that way, isn't it? I mean. A lot of people have struggled, in the older generation in my family, to just even do an online shop has been a whole episode in itself. So, by not letting these frontline workers, or not letting people who are not so exposed or don't have access so much to be left behind, let's stay with them, let's keep moving them forward with the rest of the company, make sure that they are not left behind with the know-how, with the tools, with the access to these technologies.
But it doesn't have to be the advanced. I'm thinking this scenario for my family, right? They own a chain of pubs, and I know one of the challenges that they've got is they've got two old school telephones, right? And if one wants to change from one pub to another pub, they used to pick up the phone, ring, 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 ring. You don't know whether the other person on the other end, other side of the phone is busy with a customer or currently changing a barrel, right?
Yeah.
But those kind of scenarios, those customers, you can say, right, let's take Teams, which is what we do great, right? Say, well, actually, if those two people have Teams, not only can you do the advanced stuff, saying, right, well, actually, how much change have they got, or how much beer have they got in their cellar? Can you borrow a barrel? But actually, you've got the old school, well, I'm going to say old school in air quotes, IM messaging, saying, can I borrow this? That's it. From pub one's point of view, they've sent that message. They can forget about it until they get the response back. Pub two then goes, yeah, you can send a barrel over tomorrow, like in the next 10 minutes, right? I think if we can start talking about the different levels of technology, it doesn't have to be advanced stuff. It can be stuff that we've done for the last 10, 15 years. It's just getting those processes in place, I think. So I think to your point, Sharon, about the frontline workers is, yes, we've forgotten about them, but I don't think we have to forget about them because the technology is already there to make their lives easier. We've just, and to take the CDO point, right? We've got to find those problems and give and show them the solutions, which are probably already in there. It just takes a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Cool. Brilliant.
Just a quick question, Chris, regarding the pubs. Do you give discount to work colleagues?
Sometimes. Depends how drunk you are.
Well, this doesn't depend on who you are.
Yes. We have a law, remember, we do not serve drunk people. The last outing that we had at Modality might surprise you.
Please don't go down that route. Anyway, right. Let's move on to the last topic.
So yeah, my subject is Microsoft Loop, which was a brand new technology that was introduced at Microsoft Ignite. It is a technology that allows live data no matter which tool you use. So this could be a chat window within Teams, it could be a table within Excel, or it could just be a copy and paste paragraph within Microsoft Word. The question that I've got for people is, this is a brand new way of working. It almost builds on the co-editing elements of Microsoft Word and Excel for the last 2 or 3 years that we've seen. And my question really is, will people accept this new way of working where they've saved a piece of information within Microsoft Word and thinking, that's it, I've dealt with it, I've pasted it, and realizing actually it's been updated by somebody else in a Microsoft Excel sheet because the data's changed.
I think setting out an example is probably not a bad thing, because I think if people are going to need to understand the sort of the thought process behind it. So I was trying to explain this to somebody the other day, and I said, well, if I've got an Excel spreadsheet that contains, I don't know, a pricing table, for example, of all of our products and services, and we have a document out front that we could do as a statement of work or whatever it is that says, yeah, you know, it's great, we're going to come do some work for you. Here's a list of the prices you need to be aware of. Basically, if you go in and, you know, update the Excel spreadsheet, it's going to update the specific table within Word.
Yep.
So it's that kind of, absolutely, as you said, that sort of co-authoring piece, isn't it? But it's not co-authoring a specific document. It could be that you've got your Word document in front of you, but somebody else can actually, who is the person with authority, just go back in and change something for that section, and it will automatically update everything that it's been linked to.
Yeah.
So I think the initial reaction from me when I saw it was, oh, cool, that's really quite funky. And I think within, you know, just 5 minutes of chatting, you can probably think of a whole heap of things that it could do. I think my concern, I've said I think a lot, and my concern is that there's still a very large chunk of people who don't understand co-authoring in general in a Word document. Explaining the concept of the fact that you've got one document that somebody else can go and amend somewhere else in a completely different type of document, and it will reflect in yours might scare the bejesus out of quite a large chunk of people.
Again, my question is how do you authorize? Is there a way of authorizing who can do that? Because you could have somebody quite rogue going in and changing your, let's say, your pricing table that you're about to submit to a client that's in a Word a Word document, but you've got the pricing table embedded in it. Somebody else goes in and amends that pricing table. How can you is there a way of controlling who can and who can't?
Yes, you fire the ones that go rogue.
Yeah, so I think the source of that information is like Microsoft Excel. You put it into a SharePoint list, right? That SharePoint list is only accessible by your team. And I think crucially, what you will also see is who edited that information as well. So if somebody is making that change to that pricing information, not only do you see it live on your screen, say Sharon is making this change and saying, right, these pair of shoes used to cost £100. She's changed it to 10 pence, right? You can see that those changes have come through.
Okay, I didn't realize that. That's good. Okay, and how many people can? So it's just within your group, your team. So you could have
it's whatever you define, really.
There's not a limit of people accessing that document at any one time. So you couldn't have two people, somebody changing the price at the same time. And 1 minute, it's like being on the stock exchange. One minute it's down.
Yeah, I've had 9 people co-authoring a document, which is interesting, but it does work because it nicely blocks out the fact that somebody's in that cell amending it. I don't know whether or not actually Loop tells you that somebody else has changed that. I don't think it does from what I've seen so far. But yeah, I think the security stuff will probably still be modeled around stuff that people's familiar with. So I don't think that will be too much of a concern from an admin. It does raise a question as to whether or not, because there are so many places and things that you might be able to amend content from, whether or not that will ultimately need to feed into some sort of compliance type
Maybe
service.
it's a different idea, right? So I'm taking an example. We in consulting create LLDs, low level design documents, right? Which might have different sections from, and I'm taking a voice project for us, right? It could be, we have a section for SBC, we have a section for auto attendance and call queues, right? It could be, where I see this being really good, is one master document where, let's say, 4 consultants are working from. They update their section, but actually what's happening is as it's live getting updated, that central document is constantly getting, it puts version control totally out the window, right? But it also means that document is bang up to date, and it can also be fresh, right? Our low level documents tend to be live documents as we're going through the project, because customers might say we want another auto attendant, or if we're updating that in an Excel sheet and we can refresh that live, and that's going, and we know that's going in the LLD, it actually saves some work in saying, do you know what, we need to go and do another version control of the LLD. We know that when we save that ready for custom, we're making it to a PDF, it's bang up to date. We don't have to go to the Excel sheet, copy and paste. Oh, we need that bit of information now. And so I think it's that co-editing on steroids, right? I think it's that, now that document is now as bang up to date as it can be. And I think that's probably what Microsoft's view of this was, is that any data is probably stale after 2 minutes that you put in it, especially in this world, right? If you can make sure that document, the challenge is going to be is, are we ready for a living, breathing document that can be edited and changed from multiple different places?
Yeah,
that I'm not so sure.
And I think I'd like to, I haven't done as much testing on this kind of thing as I would like to, because it's so fresh off the block. But it does raise questions as to, even internally, we have people who will take a document that's been co-edited by, co-authored by a number of people, and then they'll save their own copy of it, and change the name for another customer. So what happens to the links between maybe the Excel spreadsheet in the background and the tables in the document when you then start to change the purpose of the document for somebody else? I guess there's, you've got to be careful not to make sure that you're linking back to somebody else's information, I guess.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, Pete. And I do that. I will take a document and then I will save it in a different name for a different reason, for a different client, to share with somebody different. So then what happens?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's things to be careful of, but I think we really have to look at what it can be used for, because even Chris's examples sounds really powerful. I think Chris has got a bit of a network issue going on at the moment, but for those of you not watching it on video, he's frozen.
I'm back.
He's back. But yeah, it's the whole sort of don't let fear or concern stop you from making progress.
Yeah.
Co-authoring was originally people came out and just went, oh, I'm not sure, somebody else is changing the document at the same time as me, that's all really confusing. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So to take that to the next level where you can perpetually keep things updated from a single source, etc., sounds great. Or even just getting, as you said, you're doing sort of design document for an entire M365 program. You could put one document together with your security, your comms, your collaboration, your whatever it is you've got there, and your configurations, and pull those pieces of information in from all over the place, and eventually hand it over to the customer and say, okay, well, you've changed your IP address on this machine, change it in this box, and bang, everything else is done.
Yeah.
I think it's got the potential to be a really, really powerful thing. I do think it's going to confuse a lot of people.
I'm pretty sure it's definitely going to confuse me, but I think ultimately once people get used to it, and it's something that once you get the hang of it and you use it and get some experience in using it, then you'll just see the benefits of it. I think it's definitely going to help speed things up rather than passing document around. Can you now do this? Can you now do that? I mean, to be able to.
Comes back to the user experience, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to make sure they understand what's in it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think that link from update. I think it's that bi-directional link, right? Because if we say Excel's updating Word, but even Teams, right? We played with it in Teams chat very recently. If that can update directly from that Word document and say the summary has gone into the Teams chat window now, right? So.
Well, exactly, and we're talking about, or the examples I'm talking about are very much one direction, but if you can update that in the Word document and it updates the reference document in the background as well, that's pretty slick.
Oh, yeah. So I'm curious to see it. I think it's still very much, from my point, it's still very much not quite out there yet. We're seeing elements of it in Teams, but I can't wait to see it and see what people do with it.
This is why it's landing on your plate, though, mate, isn't it? All your automation and your productivity stuff. It's like, go on, get your teeth into it and just tell me the good stuff after.
It's my point, right? Is that whenever I go in for an interview, I always say, what's one of your strengths? Well, I'm lazy, right?
Hang on a second, back up. When I go in for an interview,
so when I come to an interview with Modality, right, one of the questions is just right. I'm lazy, right? What do you mean you're lazy? Right. Well, if I'm going to do it more than once, I'm going to automate the crap out of it. Right. So that's why I think that this Microsoft Loop product is going to be a boom for me, because I hate creating documents. And if it can automatically pull it from different areas, then I'm excited to see what it can do. Because I do think it is going to be a productivity booster, but I do think it's going to be a cultural change for people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Well, I think we're probably about the mark. I think we've probably run over, but who cares? We can we can chop bits out. It'll be fine. So thank you very much, both of you. It has been it's been a good laugh, actually. I've enjoyed that, but I think we might need to go back and revisit the potential of the Frontline story. So maybe we'll regroup on that one and do one in the new year. But thank you very much, Sharon Harvey, Global Account Director, Chris Burns, Technical Architect, and Lazy phones, apparently. He goes for interviews. Thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure. And yes, we will be back in 2 weeks' time for episode 20. Take care, guys.
Wonderful. Take care.
Take care.
Bye now. Bye.
This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.